Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. Can you believe that this is our 750th show in this format? We're 3/4 of the way to our magic 1000. They said it'd never last. Who would have thought it, eh? Good morning. I'm going to say good morning very quickly too. Let me press the right buttons. Good morning to Jim Turner, to Steve Williamson, to Kenny Thatcher, to Andy Hare, to Chris Ford, to Gary Muirhead, to Mark Whiting, and to Dan the Man Cullen. Good morning, gentlemen, one and all. And as Andy Hare has said, when I can find it, where is Andy's comment here? See it somewhere. There you are. That's the way to start a show. Good morrow, fair people of the world of hard work and getting your hands mucky. That's us, I think. Bit more of a serious show today. I'm just going to highlight this one from Steve. 10 days working straight so far. I know the feeling, and although that's not strictly true, I did take Sunday off. But yes, it does get you like that, doesn't it? Gets under your skin. As I say, bit more of a serious show today. We had some fun and frivolity with the fine folks at Hammer Glass yesterday, but a bit more serious today. 51 UK demolition and construction workers lost their life in on-site accidents in the period 2023 to 2024. That number exceeds the 5-year average of 42 deaths per year, and it's a staggering 70% higher than before COVID and the COVID-19 pandemic. Not only does that mean that construction once again tops the league table for workplace fatalities, it also means that construction is more than double the next worst sectors, which are agriculture, forestry, and mining, which killed 23 people. And let's not forget that these figures make no mention of the hundreds killed by suicide within the sector, nor the thousands killed by asbestos-related diseases. Across all industries, falls from height were the biggest single killer, yet those statistics were published just days after Construction News reported there's been a sharp decline in the number of HSE investigations into falls from height. Has the industry become complacent about safety? Is it cutting corners in the hope of making ends meet in the face of declining workloads? Is the lack of HSE policing actually having a negative impact? Regardless of the cause, the UK construction sector is more deadly today than it was 5 years ago. That's not progress. That is a deeply worrying step backwards. And just think of all of the financial bonuses that construction bosses will be awarded despite this high in-site deaths. Just think of all the OBEs and MBEs handed out to those at the top of the industry, an industry that kills roughly one worker per week. And just think in the very near future, the industry will gather at various award ceremonies, pat itself on the back and dish out awards for industry accomplishments. And here's another point. When you're a kid, you might burn your hand touching a hot kettle. Hurts like hell, but you now know not to do it again. You might get too close to a stray dog and get bitten. Again, painful, but lesson learned. In demolition and construction, we know that falls from height are the most deadly part of our business, and yet year on year, we continue to send men and women to work at height. It's said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. In the case of construction, is it insanity, or is it that the industry just can't be asked to mend its ways? And just one final point on the HSE, which we're kind of talking about here. This morning, I heard from Anne Mackay, who regular viewers will know. Her husband John was killed at Redcar almost 5 years ago. 5 years ago in September. The HSE committed to giving her an update on the 28th of June. It didn't happen. After she contacted them several times, she finally received a response saying no decision has been made, which is more or less the same message she's had for almost 5 years. Anne says this: it's unbelievable that 2 men have been killed and we're still waiting, in my opinion. She says, I feel this case is not a priority and no one seems to care. I think the whole system is just so corrupt. Can you actually argue with that? At what point do we look at this and say this isn't just recalcitrance on the part of the investigating authorities, Thames Valley Police, HSE, or whatever it might be? At what point do we just go, they're not doing their job, are they? for one reason or another, they're just not doing their job. We are going to get into that on today's question of the day. Actually, we're going to do a slightly more serious one on this occasion. Just one final thing before we move on. On Thursday this week, we will have another special guest. We will indeed. Let's have a look. There you are. That's the man in question. It is journalist and author David Wiley, who is going to be joining us to talk about his latest book, Earth Movers in USA, Australia, and Europe. He's actually holding said book there, and there's a copy of it there. He will be here at some point on Thursday's show. So if you'd like to find out all of that, then please join us if you may. If you've got the time, please spare the time. David makes for a very good interview, and he's almost certainly coming from his home office, which is floor to ceiling, wall to wall, with models for you to draw over. And while we're talking about forthcoming guests, that's on Thursday. But before we get to that, on Wednesday evening, there you are. That's Anne and Bill from Volvo will be joining us at 7 p.m. On Wednesday evening. Yeah. Let's have a look. I'm going to take that away because we've had loads and loads of stuff coming in. Did you see Hammerglass posts on social media yesterday all about the Breakfast Show? Yeah, I did. I did. The funny thing with it is, when we do these things, obviously we did it in conjunction with Hammerglass, but the basic idea is that we put the focus on Hammerglass. We showcase their product and allow them to talk about it, to take questions and everything else. The absolute truth was we ended up seeing a spike in traffic as well. That wasn't the idea, but grateful for it. Hopefully it will generate a few more members of the gang. Mental health, says Steve Williamson, can't be seen. In a way, attitude is out of sight, out of mind. You have to wonder, don't you? Would you be able to shame HSE on their lack of progress compared to other countries? Listen, I've done it. I've done it on this show. I've done it in writing. I've even done it face to face. I mean, I met up with one of the head honchos at the HSE, and before I'd even introduced myself, he said, I know who you are. You're the one that's always beating the drum about Didcot and stuff like that. They know, they're aware, they know that we're doing this. And yet here we are. And just as a small aside, just to give you an idea, I'm doing a bit of a video thing just to put on my LinkedIn page, just to keep the thing going. So this is the way it's going to be worded. On the 23rd of September 2019, 2 men were killed on a demolition site at Redcar. 1,751 days later, the families of the 2 men are still waiting for answers. On the 23rd of February 2016, 4 demolition workers were killed at the Didcot A power station. 3,059 days later, the families of those 4 men are still waiting for answers. The investigating authorities have continually and consistently failed those 6 men. They failed their respective families, and they have failed the demolition industry. Justice delayed is justice denied, is what I've said. I'm going to be putting that on LinkedIn at some point today. If you are a LinkedIn type person, please share the living tits off it, would you? I want that to go as far and as wide as we possibly can. Steve says he's talking about this guy here. It was David that came up to me and did all the publishing work about me in the Earth Movers magazine. He's on your doorstep. He is a fellow Scot. So yes, I'm sure he would have done. The HSE should be taken up on lack of investigation, making families suffering for longer than should be. To my mind, that is actually the point here. Losing somebody in a excuse me, piece of beard in my teeth. Losing somebody is bad enough. Absolutely. Losing somebody is a terrible, terrible, terribly bad thing. I can't imagine. It flashed through my mind when I got my whack on the head, and being the big drama queen that I was laying there bleeding on the floor, thinking, if I should die, what happens to my family? Well, there are 6 families there, 2 from Redcar, 4 from Didcot, plus a whole bunch of others that know precisely how that feels because they have been through it and they are suffering. But rather than, as you would do as a normal human being, putting your arm around their shoulder and helping them out emotionally, financially, whatever it might be, the industry has just said, oh, we'll put you over in this corner here and hope that we never have to speak about it again. I could get very, very angry about this. In fact, I am very, very angry about this. But what is being allowed to happen here is nothing short of a disgrace. And as I say, and I'm not pointing fingers here, because it's not the fault of the trade associations. It's not the fault of those at the very top of the industry. It's not the fault of the media around the industry. But we have a situation now where we've got people getting financial bonuses for their performance within the industry. 6 people are dead. Well, 51 people died last year, but 6 people have been dead for a long, long time and nothing's happening. And yet we're patting ourselves on the back with OBEs, MBEs, Demolition Contractor of the Year awards, Health and Safety Contribution awards, all that old tosh. It's an absolute disgrace. And to make matters worse, the Institute of Demolition Engineers and the National Federation of Demolition Contractors have been hosting joint health and safety events with the Health and Safety Executive. How have the health and safety executive got the nerve to turn up to an event like that? I mean, my personal feeling is that the NFDC and the IDE should tell them to fuck right off anyway. But how would you have the nerve, having allowed these investigations to become so protracted? You've done nothing, and yet you're going to sit there and spout about health and safety. How bloody dare you? How dare you do that? Steve says HSE are always on the case before things happen. When the shit hits the fan, they go running. Yeah, issuing their little diatribes about, oh, be careful of slips and trips, and might look out for dust, and be careful of contaminated wood. Fuck off. Sort out the fact that there are 6 bereaved families that are getting no help whatsoever, no justice, no, just nothing. They're getting no help whatsoever because you are asleep at the wheel. Jim says, I think some of the accidents are down to management not knowing their job. A lot of management nowadays never had a trade or site work experience. Indeed, they've gone straight into a clean work level, so they've never really had to weigh up the dangers that people have risen through the ranks have had to do. I think that's part of it. I'm also very, very mindful of the fact that there are, because I've been watching this for so long, you kind of start to see trends. When work gets tight, when workloads are down, there's not so much work about, and all of that kind of thing, there are 2 courses, well, 3 actually, 3 courses of action. Companies start to spend less on advertising and marketing, which obviously impacts me, but that's what happens. There's then a cutback in training, because if they can get away without training, they will. And then there is there is a tendency after that point to just cut corners in order to make ends meet. If you've won a job based on 20 guys working for 6 weeks, and you think you can get away with it by doing it over 7 weeks, but only having 12 people there is a temptation there. And that temptation, the very reason you spec that job in the first place for 20 people over 6 weeks is that's how long it would take, and that was how long it would take to do it safely. If you are starting to cut corners, people will pay the price, like the 4 guys that were killed at Didcot, like the 2 guys that were killed at Redcar, like so many others. What comfort has the HSE offered to the families? It's an utter diabolical disgrace, even though head honchos getting more money to talk about a kick in the teeth of the family suffering. So there is a system, and I can't. I'm sure it has a name. I don't know what the name is, but there is a like if you write to your doctor, for one reason or another, they have a legal requirement to respond to you in 28 days, 31 days, whatever it might be. It varies from time to time, from place to place. When Anne Mackay wrote to the HSE, they told her categorically that she would have an update by the 28th of June. The 28th of June arrived, and I'm sure, nearly 5 years on, I'm sure she was sat there waiting for the postman to arrive to say, okay, this is where we are today. Nothing arrived. Nothing arrived on the 29th, 30th. Nothing arrived on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, so on down the line of July. In the end, she, out of frustration, she contacted them, and their response was, there is no update. Why? Why is there no update? Even if they said, yes, we are, pushing towards a prosecution, or we've decided not to prosecute, well, I can't imagine why that would be the case, or whatever it might be, you would think that of all the people in the world that deserve some kind of update and being kept in the loop, it would be the families of the bereaved, or the bereaved families of the guys that were killed. The separation work site to the office side of things are night and day, awards, bonuses, etc. But on site, it's a bloody different ball game altogether. Bloody joke, says Steve Williamson. It is, and I'm not. It's not my place. I won't be attending, so it doesn't matter. But Didcot happened whatever it was, 8 years ago, 8.5 years ago. If I can scroll down the screen here. My computer's just gone on a complete go slow for some reason. So 3,059 days later, or 3,059 days ago, 4 guys went to work at Didcot A power station, and they didn't come home. 1 was recovered immediately. 3 lay undiscovered for the best part of 7 months. Okay, so 3,059 days, no justice. That job was being run by Coleman and Company. The head of Coleman and Company is going to be the keynote speaker at the World Demolition Awards this year. How does that sit with you? There's nothing worse for insulting than receiving a geriatric email. I think that's a generic email. No change in the investigation. No change in the investigation, I guess. Well said. F off. What's the point of these morons only written on a piece of paper? I don't think it's a lot to ask. Just allowing people to die on site is a terrible, terrible thing. It's an absolute blight on this industry. But I realise this is an awful comparison to draw, but I mentioned this a little while ago. If you're working with construction equipment, regardless, you might have paid through the nose for a Cat machine or a Liebherr machine or a Volvo machine, but full well it's made up of a bunch of moving parts, and at some point, unless you're really, really lucky and take exceptionally good care of it, it will go wrong. Something will go wrong. It might only be a sensor thing. It might be the windscreen wiper blade, or it might be something more serious than that. But the absolute truth of it is, it will go wrong. What separates the good from the great in terms of manufacturers and their dealers is their ability to respond. If your machine goes wrong and they are there within a couple of hours, you'd have to say, well, hats off. Machines go wrong, but they've leapt to our rescue. If they keep you waiting, the chances are you'll take your business elsewhere. We have nowhere to take our business as far as the HSE is concerned. The HSE can take as long as they damn well please, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing we can do about it at all. If you mark out a small business and someone died, how would you be able to live with yourself over the years, knowing their families are suffering? But it seems like these big companies think they're indestructible, don't really care. As long as they get their bonuses and awards, that's all they care about. Do you know the weird thing is, I know a good couple of people actually, some of whom I consider very close friends. There's one guy in particular, I won't name him, but he had a fatality on one of his sites about 10 years ago. When I spoke to him, he could tell you exactly the time of day that it happened, where he was when he heard it had happened, and everything else. But 10 years on, I spoke to him probably a couple of months ago. If he mentions that now, he still chokes up, because it was a relatively small demolition company. The guy that was killed was not a family member, but as good as, he'd been with the company for a long time. It has a real effect. And yet when you go bigger and bigger and bigger, when you get to the size of some of these demolition companies, when you get to the size of some of these construction companies, the chances are the guy that sat there behind the boardroom table with his awards for health and safety and well-being and everything else doesn't even know the name of the guy that was killed. There is nothing more insulting than receive. Oh no, we've done that one. Sorry, my apologies. Steve, forgot to say, love the cap. Thank you very much indeed. Mick Norton is here. Good morning, Mick. Us operators don't get a rise when we want one, and we do as much, if not more, work than they do. They complain about what we do. They sit and we're making their money. Yeah, it's true. It's true. 21 days till myself and Ed meet in my hometown for 3 days for the North's biggest show. Lock up your daughters, Scotland. Ed's on his way. Without a good workforce, a company is a feckle without men on the floor. It's true. Surely we need to have a deadline for Didcot to have the investigation completed by a set date. No ifs or buts. Why have we not got? I mean, I would love the HSE to say, all right, you arsehole, you've been beaten on our door for long enough. We are going to deliver our findings by the 1st of December this year. Okay, that would be fine. But why do we go into these things open-ended in the first place? Why do we not just say, here is the rules. We have to abide by rules. I have to abide by my rules. You have to abide by your rules. Why do we not have a situation with the investigating authorities? So the Environment Agency, the Health and Safety Executive, any police forces that get involved, or whatever it might be, you have, somebody's been killed or somebody's been hurt, somebody's been maimed. You have now got 18 months. Let's say 18 months. 18 months in which to deliver your findings and to get this thing resolved and to give some closure to the families of the bereaved or those that have been maimed. Why can we not do that? And I'm sure there will be exceptional circumstances where, maybe the HSE has to come back and say, this one is really, really complex. We've got dozens more witnesses to go through. So rather than 18 months, we're going to take 2 years. Okay, not happy about it, but at least we know where we stand. Instead of which, we have a situation where it's just open-ended. If you go to start work on a motorway, let's use Demolition as an example. You're going to take down a motorway bridge over a motorway. You've got from midnight on Friday until 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. That's it. There's no room for maneuver. If you overrun, you'll be fined heavily. You have to pull out all the stops to make sure you hit those deadlines. Exactly the same with construction. All the aspects. You as individuals, if you go to work and somebody says, well, we've done all the tests, we've done all the analysis. The job that you're about to do, I don't know, digging a trench or digging some footings for a house, is going to take you 2 hours, 4 hours, 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks. If after 3 weeks you're still sat there doing it, somebody's going to ask a question. And yet when it goes to the HSE, when it goes to the health, to the Environment Agency, when it goes to the police forces, no one asks the questions. No one. They are quite literally beyond the law. And now people get generated emails. I'd feel they don't give a toss. No, I'd agree. Totally agree. Why are they still investigating? I mean, what are they investigating? I've said this before. Didcot brought down somewhere around about 15,000 tons of steel. Okay. And, so all of that was carted off. The bodies, what was left of them, were analysed. I'm sure the steel was analysed. They've got hundreds and hundreds of witness testimonies. So what are they now looking at? I mean, surely somebody can look at the witness statements. There will be a bias in one direction. It was just a pure accident, or there was negligence, or there was a design fault, or whatever it might be. After 8 years, there must be a leaning towards some sort of finding. And yet, no, they just go on and on and on. Who can name Labour's minister with responsibility for health and safety? I can't. I've got to be honest, nor can I. But I'm going to let us both off on that, Mick, because it is only a couple of days since they were actually appointed. I'm sure we will come to that. But as soon as I find out, they're getting a letter from me. Let me be absolutely honest. Why don't they do like in the USA? Few months, completed findings. Yeah, I mean, in America, it is 18 months. And bearing in mind what a litigious nation the Americans are, they are very, very keen to sue anyone. Maybe we should follow the same thing. Can you sue the HSE? Could the families of Didcot and Redcar band together and say, enough's enough, we're suing you? Is there some sort of additional justice that you can appeal to? I don't know. 6 to 8 weeks it took for families to get compensation after 9/11. I know it's different. Just shows the UK is shy, and we all put up with it. Yeah, we do. And think about that. You know, you're all. I'm guessing most of you are probably at work now. If God forbid something were to happen to you, and you're laying there, as I was. I mean, as I say, I'm a bit of a drama queen, but I was laying there thinking, I wonder, you know, I could potentially be breathing my last here, having been hit in the head with a brick. I was laying there thinking, you know, it wasn't a case of my life flashing before my eyes. It was more a case of, wonder if my family will be okay. I wonder if the company that have they didn't allow it to happen. It was just one of those things. But are they going to reach out to my family and say, "Don't worry, we've got you covered. You know, we'll pick up the tab for your next 6 months of mortgage while the insurance comes out and all that." Do they do that, or do they not? People are afraid to speak up against HSE and these tier one contractors. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. Um, I think we've ended up with a situation where they are too big and too powerful. I think that's the absolute truth. Americans are so passionate on why they do and look after everyone on the site. UK is the opposite. That's one of the things that bugs me the most about all of this. You know, that how many times do you read on social media about construction companies? Our greatest asset is our people. Oh, we take great care of our people. We have health and safety first aiders. You know, we have regular family parties. We go bowling once a month. Yeah, but if one of them is killed, what happens then? Yeah, it's something different. Grow balls, people, and take action. Stand together and force them out. Again, not looking for unionization, but I swear to God, back in union days, this would not have been allowed to stand. Um, don't worry, Mark. I'll look after her. She's an expensive hobby, mate. I'll tell you that. But thank you for the offer. Families went through hell, still getting dragged through it years later. That alone is a joke. How do you do that? How do you do that? You know, if you knew, you know, what one of your friends or acquaintances had lost someone in their family, you'd reach out, wouldn't you? You know, you and I'm saying this, and I've admitted this before. I'm very bad at grief, really, really bad. I'm bad at it myself, but I'm even worse at it with other people. You know, if a friend of mine loses a parent or a partner or whatever it might be, you know, I do my level best to begin with to avoid, because I'm despite what I do for a living, I'm very, very bad at finding the right thing to say. Very, very bad. But ultimately, you will put your arm around and say, you know, we're here for you. If there's anything we can do, the construction companies don't do that. The demolition companies don't do that. And moreover, the police and the health and safety executive don't do that either. If I came into site with a fancy painted hard hat, I'd be slagged off. America is opposite. Yeah, yeah, it is. No one sticks together and say, okay, 70 men on this site, so no one gets on site until everyone is rectified. These clowns won't stand together. No, they won't. They won't. And unfortunately, the only time that you actually do get them to stick together is when it's too late, when somebody has actually been killed or maimed. Right. We are half an hour in, and I haven't even started the show. So, shall we do that? Shall we do that? I think we probably should. I will start things in a minute. Jim Turner says it's all about big business, and the UK has slowly but surely leaned towards backing them over the past 40 years. They don't mind stepping on the small firms, but the big boys get propped up by the establishment, and it fucking stinks. It does. Now, here's the thing. I was talking about Redcar. I was talking about Didcot. Here is Anne Mackay, who, as I say, lost her husband at Redcar almost 5 years ago. And she says, I feel we've been let down immensely by the police and the HSE Great Britain. Needs to step up and change its laws and the way they deal with deaths at work. We as a family are struggling emotionally, mentally, and family. We are desperate for answers and help. Thank you, Mark. You seem to be one of the few people that truly support us. Much appreciated. Well, okay, let's address the last bit. What does it say about the system where a widow is being supported by a journalist? It's nonsense. Anne and I should never have spoken. There should be no interaction between us, because if we lived in a just world, well, if we lived in a just world, her husband wouldn't be dead anyway. But if we lived in a properly just world, there's been an accident, her husband has been killed, the company that was responsible for the site would have put their arm around her and helped her out. The health and safety executive would have investigated things and would have given her some sort of closure. Instead of which, she sat here watching this with no answers nearly 5 years later. It's a nonsense. It is a complete and utter nonsense. Right, it is Tuesday, the 9th of July. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition. In today's show, Kobelco assemble, getting the lowdown on Komatsu's latest mining dozers, Caterpillar eyes on electric future, and we go behind the scenes at Sunward. Plus, JCB highlights hydrogen at Hillhead. That's a lot of H's. Highlights hydrogen at Hillhead. I don't just throw these things together, you know. There you are, Dan Cullen saying, well said, Anne. Sorry for all this suffering you and these families are in over lack of support from these companies and the HSE. 100%. Before we get to all of the stuff and nonsense, I do need to show you today's mystery machine. I reckon this is a toughie, so get your binoculars out. Right, here is the machine, what you need to identify. And all I can say is good luck with it. There you are. That is what you have to do. Just identify that. Tell you, it comes from a very well-known brand. Very well-known brand. If you've got any thoughts on that, then please let us know in the chat. I've just, I am going to very quickly remind you of our question of the day right now, actually, which goes back to the very start of the show. So here we go. Yeah, nice and simple today. I realise our question of the day is usually something trivial, like what's your favourite flavour of ice cream or what was the name of your first pet, but it seems inappropriate in light of today's news. So rather than that, my question today is this: how do we, as an industry, reduce or better still eliminate site fatalities? Gary Muirhead makes a very, very good point indeed. How are we going to learn anything from these accidents unless we conclude the investigation? Yeah. I mean, specifically, I think with Didcot, bearing in mind the number of power stations that were required to come down, coal-fired or fossil-fueled power stations, there's about 1,500 to come down around the world, including about 20 here in the UK. It would have been very, very handy to have known what the cause of Didcot was before we went all guns blazing into another one. And yet the HSE decided that was not going to be the case. Question of the day, Steve Williamson says, concentrate on the bigger things rather than the small show. Yeah, I mean, just bear that in mind, okay? And you know, this is not specifically having a dig at the HSE, although they do ask for it. You know, we've got, I don't know. I mean, there was a fatality on a rye site. There was a fatality on a collard site, others as well. Plus, we've got the 4 at Didcot. We've got the 2 at Redcar. All of those things. And yet the HSE will issue on a quarterly basis, or, you know, beware of ladders, or watch your shoelaces, or make sure you've got suntan lotion because the sun might come out. As somebody that suffers from sunburn and has had sunstroke, it's very unpleasant. But compared to multiple deaths, really? Is that where your concentration is? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So we've had some initial answers on our mystery machine. Dan Cullen's going for a Lugon loading shovel. Tis not. Dan is also going for an 828 JCB shovel. It's not one of those either. Steve is going for the Deer 744. It's not. JCB 110B tracked crawler dropped. Oh, I wish I could find a photograph of one of those. I would use that, but no, it's not one of those either. And JCB 416 shovel. It's none of those things. So let me show you a smidgen more. There you are. That's what you've got to work with. I mean, you're all on kind of the right path, but none of you have got that close yet. So keep the guesses coming. We'll be right back after this. Kobelco refer to this video that I'm about to show you as the birth of a legend, or birth of a new legend, I think it is. Not so much a birth as an assembly, but pretty damn good anyway. Mystery Machine is over already. 2 slides in and it's over already. I can tell you Gary Muirhead was going for the Cat 951 at 10:38. Steve Williamson said, is it the Liebherr 1500 LSL? But at 10:37, Dan Cullen came up with the same answer, the Liebherr LSL 1500, which is exactly what it is. Dan Cullen, let me show it to you just to prove that he's not making it up. There you are. That is the Liebherr LSL 1500. Dan Cullen, 1 minute, possibly less than that, 1 minute ahead of Steve Williamson, has got the right answer. So, as it stands at the moment, Dan and Steve and Garvin are all on 6 points. I'm on 3, and everybody else is yet to score. So there you are. Mick has just joined. Good morning, Mick. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Jim Turner going back. Let me remove that. Jim Turner going back to our question of the day. Our question of the day: how do we reduce or eliminate, even better still, site fatalities? Question of the day: site-based learning for new starters from seasoned tradesmen, ideally apprenticeships. Sending people home that break the rules and total site bans for repeat offenders. More accountability for gangers and to keep their workers abiding by the rules, tougher testing for safety administrators to make sure they actually understand the rules they are making up and implementing. Here, 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 and here, here. I agree with every single one of those. Steve says, "Oh, for F's sake, Dan," and Dan says, "Now the battle's on." Yeah, it is. It is a 3-way tie at the top of the league table. Where are we today? It is the 9th of July, so we've probably got about another dozen, if not a few more than that, to run for this year, for this month. Who will be top of the pile when we come to the end of the month? As I say, 3-way split at the moment. It's Steve, Dan, and Garvin are tippity top at the moment, but plenty of time for somebody to come in and overtake. But well done. It most certainly was the Liebherr LSL 1500 from way back when. I think probably predates me, but I'm not entirely sure. Dozers, Komatsu dozers, right after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
I'm not even going to bother to introduce this. I mean, bearing in mind we are 41 minutes into the show, this doesn't need an introduction. It's Komatsu dozers. They're big. They're fantastic. Just look.
You know, most people, when they think of mining, they think of old school mining. The guy's getting in the ground and he's dirty, and they just think of old school ways. If they were to come out and see the new equipment that the operators get to use, that we build, the cabs are pressurized and we have air conditioning, and how quiet those cabs are, I think they'd be really surprised.
Coming from another position within the industry and on the engineering side, one of the first things that I did notice is just how rigid and how stoutly built that these units really are. The focus when we were introducing D475A-8 is take customer feedback. I don't think there is one stone unturned. We've increased engine horsepower in the reverse direction. We took a look at the mainframe, you know, the backbone of the machine. We essentially doubled the design life. We have remote mounted grease banks, your fluid evacuation center and your fluid service center. That's all ground level. We want them getting back into production.
With this dozer, you have a ladder that allows them safe access to the machine. And then the cab is very quiet. It's got great visibility compared to previous models. So I think there's gonna be a lot of people that are really gonna like this. The relationship between Komatsu and the customer has grown a lot since the time I've been with Komatsu. I would say for me, probably the best thing I like is to be able to go out there and talk to an operator, give that operator something that they just didn't know about. You know, show them a feature that potentially will make their life better. And then to see them achieve their production goals, I mean, it's awesome. The technology that we use on our mining equipment, technology we've used in smart construction, it's all designed to help the customer, to optimize them and to help them reach their goals. And that's how we create value together.
Now, I think Steve Williamson may have stumbled on an idea here. He says, see that? That's a holiday for me. A week in somewhere like that. I just sit and watch, be in my element. Wife wouldn't be too happy though. Why is nobody doing that? So, bear with me for a second here. So, you can go and live in a tent for a best part of a week to watch your favourite bands at Glastonbury or at Reading or the Isle of Wight Festival or at Leeds or whatever it might be. Why has nobody come up with the idea of a mining holiday or a quarry holiday where you just basically turn up in your camper van or your transit van with a mattress in the back or a tent fully kitted out and you just sit there and watch big diggers all day? Be honest, who would fancy a bit of that? I'm not sure I'd want to do a week. Bit old for camping now, but a couple of days, sitting there watching big dozers do their thing while eating bacon sandwiches at the mouth of your tent. Really? I would. I'd be all over that. Steve says, what a machine. Really is what a machine. Mick says, good question, but the definition of the word accident in my mind says it all. Yes, a tougher regime in training and awareness is a great answer, but the law of sod will always be there. Yeah, I do get myself I get myself in trouble every single time I talk about accidents. I mean, that's why I got fired from the NFDC. I was too outspoken about site deaths, so they fired me. So okay, it's it's water under the bridge. If they hadn't fired me, I wouldn't be doing this. So I'm grateful in the long run. One of the things I do get in trouble with is the fact that I do believe that accidents are a thing. I'm very, I'm an adult. I wouldn't say I'm above average intelligence, but I can look after myself. Have I ever tripped over a paving slab? Yeah. Have I ever banged my head on an HX 1000 excavator at quarry at a Hillhead show? Yeah, done that. I know how big the cab is, but I still whack my head. Accidents will happen. But there's two things. I don't think we're doing enough to prevent them in the first place, and we're doing an absolutely piss poor job at investigating them when they do happen. Jim Turner says, the old fella used to be on a 375 or 475. He said it was streaks ahead of the cat of equal size, but didn't last as long. Yeah, swings and roundabouts, people. We should be the first thing. Yes, we should. Quarry and mine operators of the world just set up a secure area. We're not going to go and walk in front of dump trucks and dozers. We're all grown-ups here. Just set up a little area where we've got a good overview of what's going on. We'll pay for the privilege. We'll come along. We'll pitch our tents. We'll break out our thermos flasks and our primer stoves, and we will just watch you do your thing. No judgment. We're not the health and safety executive. I'd even agree not to filming, if that's the way you want. But if you would like to give us access so that we can just sit there and watch this stuff unfolding, count me in. Chris Ford, question of the day: retire or reintroduce common sense. If you do something wrong, it will kill you and hurt you like you won't believe as it's doing it. Yeah. I do wonder, and I realise there is this idea of shock fatigue. I always seem to hark back to things like Live Aid and Band Aid and stuff like that. Where you're being shown images of starving children to get you to part with money. And I know the tobacco industry have gone a long way down that. They started out with fairly small health and safety warnings on their cigarettes to the I can't remember the last time I actually saw a packet of cigarettes, but they were doing photographs of damaged lungs. These cancer sticks will kill you. You'd probably better avoid them. Are we doing that in this industry? If you ended a toolbox talk with a photograph of the aftermath of somebody falling off a tower block, get my attention. I hate the idea that we have to do it. I hate the idea that anybody would have taken a photograph in the first place. But if that's what it takes to make people safer, maybe. And Anne apparently wants to go camping with us. And we'll give you your own space, but love to do that. Steve says, imagine watching big dumpers driving at sunset with the dust coming off the wheels. Oh, doesn't he paint a picture, eh? Doesn't he paint a picture? You imagine that, though. In an ideal world, I'd like to do it in, the States or Australia or somewhere like that. And as he said, that orange sky, big dump truck going across, the sound and the smell and oh yeah, absolutely. Mick says, always found when I had a busman's holiday, the divorce solicitor was rubbing his greedy hands. Oh well. Yeah, but bizarrely, I go on. I never have. I've never actually been on a fishing holiday. Been fishing a lot, but I've never been on a fishing holiday because I really enjoy fishing. But I really enjoy this stuff. Why have I never been on a digger holiday? People, Caterpillar. What's the name of their place in Arizona? Tinaja Hills. I'd love to go camping there for a couple of days. Caterpillar, if you're paying attention. Dan Cullen says, I'd be happy to sit and watching plant and screeners and crushers working. Yeah, you and me both. Let's show how bad fags are for you, but then use plastic to build fancy coloured and fancy flavoured puff sticks. Yeah. We do that, don't we? And are we sure that these vapes are healthy? I don't think we are. And yet we're selling them by the million. Yeah, because that's how smart we are. We've been looking behind the scenes at how machines are built. Also gives you a bit of an insight into just how big some of these companies are. I'm about to show you one. Sunward. It's bigger than you might imagine. I think I've been guilty in the past of when you look at a company like the one that surprised me was Venieri, Italian manufacturer of backhoe loaders and compact wheel loaders. And I've always thought of them as being a little itty bitty company, when in actual fact they're bloody enormous. The Chinese even more so. Sunward, the Sunward factory isn't so much a factory as a city. Check this out. Steve Williamson says, "Oh, look, people, China, the place where everyone says it's Chinese crap. Don't see something like that here in the UK. We can't say a word on China-made items." Did you see the scale of that? Now, bearing in mind, well, obviously, I think we're all very familiar with the Lugong brand. XCMG is the third biggest manufacturer of construction equipment in the entire world. And Sunward, look at the bloody scale of that. And proper job as well. Go back to our idea of digger holidays. Mick says, any of the demo mob on here need to go around the Mediterranean islands. You could stand there for hours watching and wincing. Do you know, here's the thing. So back in the day, I used to attend quite a few of these European Demolition Association events, and they always travelled from place to place. Can't remember where the next one is, but we used to go from place to place to place. And I do remember going to one in Spain, in Bilbao, and the event itself was at the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. Fantastic city, fantastic venue, really good event. But on one of the days of the event, we went out to visit a waste transfer station, and it was an abomination. There was dust and crap and stuff flying about the place. And I was actually with a Dutchman and a Norwegian, and the three of us were stood there. Oh, that would never fly where we come from. That would never be allowed. That's an awful thing. Fast forward a few years, and you go to somewhere like Italy, for example, or Spain now, or France, or Germany, or Sweden, or all of these places, every bit as good as us, if not, in some instances, better. Yeah, which brings me to, I know we've had another question from Steve, who says, have you got any travels for the rest of the year, Mark? Yeah, going back to Italy at some point a bit later in the summer. I'll tell you more about that. I don't want to give too much away because some arsehole will pick the phone up and try and beat me to it. So yeah, planning to do a bit of that, but also I'm trying to do a few other bits and pieces. I'd love to get up to Finland before the end of the year and go and really do the job on Lecatec, assuming they are willing to do that. And if I'm going to Finland, I'd love to pop by and see Avant and Rama and all of the people up there. So I'd love to do a bit of that, but I'll keep you posted on that. Gary Muirhead, going back to holidays with diggers, I've got a Komatsu D375 working only about 20 minutes away, still trying to get over to see it. Is that you not having the time, or is that not them not allowing you access? Imagine. So for those of you that actually went to Hillhead, when you go into Hillhead, after you've done the slalom through the pavilion, literally as you start your walk down the hall road, over to the right-hand side, there is what they refer to as the viewing platform. They call it a viewing platform for a very good reason. It's a platform where you can see the whole show. It's fantastic. You can literally stand there, and there's room for about, 8, 9 people, I suppose, and you can see the entire show laid out before you. Wouldn't that be a fab thing at a decent quarry? For local school children, come along and see where, the stone for their school, the stone for their road, the stone for their house actually came from. That'd be fantastic. But also to actually open it up to the public, have it cordoned off. I'm not condoning sending people wandering around quarries. Have the whole thing fenced off and very secure, but actually have a viewing platform where you could go along, pull in, even spend a day there if you like. Take your little Tupperware box of sarnies and just sit there and watch the whole thing happen. Quarry operators and mine operators of the world. Let's make it happen, shall we? Question of the day. I feel to reduce fatalities and accidents, they need to blame the person that's acting stupid or taking shortcuts. As they sign method statements and meant to understand it, not blame the site supervisor. I totally agree with that. Question of the day. Harsher punishment, says Gary Muirhead, on site. Start clamping down on misuse of drugs and alcohol and unsaved acts happening every day. Again, once again, and this is a genuine criticism, 51 site deaths in 2023 to 2024. How many of those were linked to or caused by the misuse of drugs or alcohol? We don't know, because the Health and Safety Executive, in their infinite wisdom, have chosen not to record that. That's helpful. Imagine for a second that I know they've identified that a lot of those accidents and fatalities were down to falls from height. But if it were established that, let's say, half of those, just as a round figure, 25 of the 51 was caused by the presence of alcohol or drugs. That's an easy fix because you then instigate compulsory drug and alcohol testing. Problem solved. Problem solved. There will, as we've already agreed, there will still be accidents, but you have basically cut off a source of accidents at its source just by taking preventative measures. Instead of which, you choose not to measure it at all. Chris Ford says, today's thinking is that there's always someone to blame. For all the accidents reporting and prevention, there's always a scapegoat. When was the last time you actually saw a report of what actually happened? You'll see a report of the company X was fined £1 trillion for not having done this and that and the other, but the background build up as to why it happened. Not a lot. Things normally happen because someone will do what they're not supposed to do. I think it's human nature, and then the message ends. But you're right. And I think, going back to the point we made about Didcot, thinking about that one in particular, and I've said this before, we're more than 8 years, 8.5 years in now. If the health and safety executive had come back and said, we're not trying to prejudice any prosecution that may or may not happen in the future, but we have identified, our analysis have identified that this thing here, this thing here, that's what caused the problem. So if you're going to take down a power station here in the UK or anywhere else in the world, be aware of that thing, because we found that is an issue. 8.5 years later, nothing at all. Question of the day. Mick Norton says, fatality would be less present day if operators looked after each other a bit better and received quality training. I look at the modern day ticketed seat warmer and see incompetence, a lack of work ethic, and a disregard for safety of self and others. Until there's a major change in how we teach health and safety in machine applications, the incompetence and fatalities will be ever present. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, a lot of the criticism that I've made today has been aimed at the health and safety executive. But let's not forget, in order for you to get your ass or your feet or your boots on a construction site or a demolition site here in the UK, you have had to jump through several training hoops. So you've had to abide by the rules set by the CITB, CSCS, CPCS, NOCN, NDTG, and all of these people. Where is their role in this? Are we absolutely convinced that those we are sending into a hazardous work environment? Let's make no bones about it. Demolition and construction is a hazardous work environment. Are we really, really, really convinced that those that we are spitting out of a classroom in their hundreds and their thousands every single year, are we absolutely sure that A, they're competent, and B, they are fully cognizant with the risks facing them? Because I don't believe we are. I don't believe we are. I mean, I've done asbestos awareness. I've done the asbestos awareness test, or the course and everything else. At no point in that training was I given any indication of the unpleasantness of a death via an asbestos-related disease. I was told roughly how to identify it purely by photographs, which is probably not a bad idea, but I was told purely by photographs. This is what asbestos looks like. If you see it, report it to somebody and back away, which is fine. But would it not be better? Would it not be better to actually reinforce that by saying, and here's somebody whose lungs were eaten away by asbestos or mesothelioma over a period of 20 or 30 years. This is what you're talking about. It's not, oh, look, there's some of that horrible asbestos, I best report it. Here is how it's going to kill you if you don't watch yourself with it. Right. Right. Could we get together, get a tour of JCB? Let's organise a house for a few days and be all plant addicts in one place. I have asked the question. Dan says that's some factory. You're absolutely right. I'm sure the OCCS site at Denby Pottery had a viewing platform when the old follower was there. Yeah. But then, I mean, I don't know how long ago we're talking about. But you think back, the number of people that I've interviewed, some of them relatively young. How did you get, how were you inspired into construction. And I know there's people like Steve, as an example, inspired by his grandfather, and I know Jim's dad was in the business. But there's a lot of people, I was at school and I could see the building of the M1 or the M40, and I just looked at the diggers and thought, yep, that's for me. I'll have a piece of that. Now, 7 foot tall site holding, you can't see what's going on. How do you inspire with that? And exactly the same with this. A viewing platform to actually see. Imagine, a class of 12-year-old boys and girls looking at, 200-ton dump trucks doing their thing, and 100-ton excavators loading them. I'm pretty sure that one or two of them are going away thinking, do you know, I'd like a bit of that. That looks a bit of me, that does. Can you imagine, says Mick, the HSE brigade allowing that to happen, Mark? The insurance people will go redder than an S&M madam's ass after a spanking. Well, I can't comment on the final part. I really can't comment on the final part. But yes, you're absolutely right. And all this leads to AI, GPS, self-driving vehicles. Cut out the idiots. See, said it before, I don't want anyone to lose their job and so on down the line. But do you not get the impression that we are backing ourselves into that corner? And maybe, let's throw a conspiracy theory in there, because we haven't had one of those for a while. Imagine if you really wanted the introduction of AI and autonomous machines and robotics, because it will be more productive, cheaper, more reliable. We don't have robots with hangovers, or weddings to attend, or requiring maternity or paternity leave. We don't need any of that. So if the industry had, imagine, Build UK, let's put them in charge of the conspiracy. They've got themselves together, all of the major tier 1 contractors in the UK, and they've said, do you know what? The easiest way to get AI in this business is to allow a few more people to die, and then there can be no objection, because we can ride over the hill like the cavalry and say, we can solve every single site death. We are going to remove men and women from the site, and we're going to make the whole thing autonomous. Obviously, that conversation has never taken place. But if it had, it would explain an awful lot, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Question of the day: we need a dedicated alcohol drug test weekly at random. Yeah, we do. We do. And again, it's one of those things. I know Callum McIntosh up in Scotland at the Scottish Plant Owners Association. I don't know whether it's a specific problem up in Scotland or whether he is just particularly forceful about it. He's leading the charge on that, and as far as I know, getting basically nowhere. And yet you've got parts of the industry, like, if you're working on rail, drug and alcohol testing is part and parcel. You have to go through that. And yet in demolition and construction, not so much. And what I find really bizarre is that, and again, I'm going to speak specifically about demolition companies here. If they are required to work in the nuclear industry or the petrochemical industry or alongside the rail industry, drug and alcohol testing becomes part and parcel of their everyday work. They raise the bar to hit those marks, and some of the processes they put in place, ISO related and all that kind of thing. When the work in petrochemical, nuclear, or alongside rail ends, they will maintain those standards. We've hit this level, we've hit peak level of efficiency and everything else. Our reporting is fantastic, our transparency is awesome, and yet, having proved that drug and alcohol testing has its benefits, as soon as they go back into mainline demolition, that just gets, what's the term? Fucked off. Just, no, don't need that anymore. No, Mark, numbers and money will always win. Yeah, they will. And again, going back to my conspiracy theory, here's the other thing. There is always somebody to replace somebody that's been killed. Be it a red car, be it a Didcot, whatever it might be, yes, I know at Didcot there was a change in demolition company, but there was always somebody to come along and carry that work on. There are no buildings still left standing because somebody was killed and they went, no, that's it. That just needs to stay there. That does not exist. They will always find a replacement. And Gary says, I don't care what anyone says, you can't train a black pudding. No, you can't. You can't. Which is a damn shame, because I'd love to train an actual black pudding to jump into my pie hole. But that's a whole other story. Dan says, well said, Mr. Norton. Everyone is out for themselves. No one is helpful to newcomers. Too many people bullshit their way into the industry. Sad, but true. Chris Ford says there used to be a viewing platform at Mount Sorrel Quarry and at Croxton Quarry at one time. Do you know, I actually remember the one at Mount Sorrel. I do remember the one at Mount Sorrel. Funnily enough, and completely unrelated, Tristan Mays has just popped into the chat over on Instagram. I was actually thinking, he popped up on my LinkedIn yesterday. I think he commented on something. I thought, I haven't spoken to him for ages. And there, lo and behold, he is back. The Crane Man is here. And our friend Wolfie is over from the States as well. Good day to you, sir. Mick Norton says, I recently took a non-construction mate to view earthworks at a huge housing development in the M62 corridor. The site was attempting to get down to reduced levels using a dozer, shovel loaders, tractor and toad scraper and a handful of ADTs. I gave him 5 minutes to take in all the noisy site activity, and unfortunately then had to tell him, John, that's how not to do it. The entire site operation was unsafe, uncoordinated, and lacking the key ingredient of supervision and quality. I'm guessing that's quality control. Steve says, look at my machine, GPS and tilt rotator and decent sized machine. Cuts out all the mini, MIDI and some other machines with idiots in them tracking about everywhere. I don't care if some people need work. To anyone that goes to work, you need to put the effort in, take pride. You get paid for it. Make friends and look after each other. We're here more than we are at home. If you're an idiot and cause damage and injuries, then tough. You don't deserve a job. And you see, there's kind of a weird double standard, isn't it? You know, if somebody of 16, 17 years old, you know, they've got their card and they turn up on site, and if they don't hit the ground running and are every bit as productive as those with, you know, 10, 20, 30 years more experience than them, they are urged towards the exit. And yet we've still got people going around breaking the rules, pissed out their mind, drugged up, and we allow that to fly. How do we allow that to fly? I have another film to show you, and it's a good one. So let me finish up. In actual fact, I've got two. Should we skip one as we're an hour and 11 minutes in? I tell you what, I am going to skip one. I'm going to go straight to Hillhead. We'll come back with the other one tomorrow. Yeah, I'll come back to what Caterpillar is doing in the field of electric machines tomorrow. Give you plenty of time to prepare your arguments against electric machines. In the meantime, I've given you no time to prepare your arguments against hydrogen machines. Here is our friend Tim Burnhope to tell you why it's the future.
So welcome to JCB Hydrogen here at Hillhead 2024. We've got the hydrogen exhibition here. Behind us you can see the hydrogen engine, lots and lots of super interest in that. We've also brought with us the hydrogen backhoe loader, again huge amount of interest, fantastic machine out in action. But today we've brought something completely new, a hydrogen generator. Here you see a generator running on zero CO2 hydrogen, fitted with a hydrogen combustion engine. So what does that mean? Zero CO2 hydrogen going in and nothing but clean steam coming out. So absolutely fantastic solution. This one here is a 60 kVA solution, operates exactly the same as today's generator, but a zero CO2 solution instead. So we've just seen the hydrogen generator. And why is it so important? Well, many people on construction sites today are talking about the use of microgrids in future. So how does a microgrid work? Well, it all starts with this, the battery box. So this is a solution here with a battery box, but let's look at a microgrid. So the battery box will become the center of microgrids in future. How will the battery box be charged? Well, we'll use a hydrogen combustion generator. Also, there'll be inputs for both solar and for wind. Electricity is stored and then can be fed to recharge either small electric machines or, more importantly, many of the welfare units that are available on site today. So we're working very hard to get great solutions for microgrids in future.
I'll pop to the chat in just a second. But I mean, always enjoy spending time with Tim Burnhope because I think he's a smashing fellow and he certainly knows his stuff. Think about that. Microgrids. As it stands at the moment, you know, we turn up on site and we expect to have somewhere to plug in your kettle or whatever it might be, or you have a generator and all. You imagine where you're thinking that far ahead, where you have a microgrid that might even be solar powered or wind powered, possibly both, powering all of those different types of machines. Have we just seen the future? I wonder. Steve, first of all, says, if all of us had our own business, would we employ idiots just because people need a job? I don't think we would. Unfortunately, I have employed idiots in the past. Morning, Worthing. That's a whole other story. I think electric will be bigger. Just have that feeling. I don't know. I genuinely don't know at this point in time. Every time I'm exposed to proper electric, you know, so like with Volvo and stuff, every time I look at it, I think, why not? Why have we not just gone, oh, yes, please let us have a bit of that? And then you've got the promise of hydrogen lurking in the background. I'm still not convinced. But if the network's there and the price is right, hydrogen, maybe, I don't know. Our friend Wolfie says, a deterrent to death? Tell them if they die, they're fired. It's a point. Gary Muirhead says a drugs and alcohol test should be the first time done on, but let me try it again with my own teeth in. A drugs and alcohol test should be the first thing done on site before a site induction. If you fail that test, you should be escorted off site. Yeah, you absolutely should, because you're a danger to yourself and you're a danger to those around you, your colleagues, pedestrians, anybody in a neighbouring building. You are a danger. Get the hell out of here. What would be safer, says Steve Williamson, plug-in charger or fuel hydrogen in a machine? What the hell is HSE going to do with this? It's a good question. Now, bearing in mind we've now spent an hour and 16 minutes talking about the shortcomings of the HSE and their failure to act in the event of accidents. Have they got their finger on the pulse in developments on electric machines? You know, I know we always talk about thermal runaway with electric cars and stuff. Is there a plan in place from the HSE? You know, have they actually considered that? Have they considered about what happens if there's a problem with a hydrogen machine or a hydrogen bowser or a hydrogen tanker or whatever it might be? Have they considered that? Are we sat here thinking, well, they've clearly dropped the ball on red car and didcot, but I'm sure they've got us covered on electric and hydrogen machines? Are we thinking that? I'm not. I don't think they've looked at it at all. And if they have, they've kept it awfully bloody quiet. Mick says, in my experience of post-fatality investigation by the HSE, they very rarely apportion any culpability to the operator or card scheme MVQ provider when there are clear questions to answer. They find the employer an easier target under the legislation. An easier target and a more lucrative one. I am a professional cynic. That's why I do this for a living. The Didcot power station collapse happened mid-afternoon on the 23rd of February 2016. I was on that site, or on the outskirts of that site, let me think, about 14 hours later. And by that time, that site was under the jurisdiction of the Health and Safety Executive. At the time, I remember thinking, well, they've acted very quickly. They've put a cordon around it and everything else. And, you know, maybe they are going to oversee the investigation and everything else. The absolute truth is now, 8.5 years on, and I'm personally convinced of this, they looked at it and thought, prosecution. There's going to be a lot of money to be made out of this. There's a big prosecution to be had. We will find a scapegoat. We will point our bony finger at them, and we will charge them accordingly. It's taken a lot longer. It's taken at least twice as long as I predicted it would, but that was my feeling. Literally, the first day, they were already thinking lucrative prosecution. Jim Turner says that really is the future. Solar, wind, and hydro-produced hydrogen transported around the world by hydrogen-powered boats, trains, and pipelines. Totally green. I'd be up for it. I'd pop on a hydrogen plane, so long as they assured me that they could get all the way. How many are doing hydrogen? How many companies are doing electric? Obviously, because we've had electric for a little bit longer, I would say there are certainly more companies doing electric than hydrogen. But let me think. Liebherr, JCB, Hyundai, Bobcat have all shown hydrogen-fueled machines or prototypes or whatever. It's coming. It is coming. We will end up having to wear SSE protective equipment in the machine. Listen, nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me at all. And I realize it's overkill, but what are the hazards of charging machine? What are the hazards if an electric machine does catch fire? What are the hazards if there is a fire involving a hydrogen machine or a hydrogen tanker or whatever it might be? What are the hazards? Is anybody looking at that? Maybe the health and safety executive are so busy looking at this forthcoming technology, that's why they've dropped the ball on Redcar and Didcot. Maybe not, but maybe. Mix says, what does Mix say? Although the HSE has much to answer on Didcot, similarly, the Thames Valley Police, who hold joint primacy of the investigation, they do. But who watches the Watchmen? Forgive my movie trivia. But who polices the police? Who polices the health and safety executive? I know Mick pointed out, I can't name the person that's responsible at the moment for all things health and safety related, but we have a new Home Secretary. Why are they not? I mean, I did my open letter. I'm not expecting an answer, but I did my open letter. Why is there not a list on somebody's desk somewhere that says this investigation has been going on for 8.5 years? Let's get it fixed. Get that one off the table, and then that twat down in Epsom will stop bleating about it, and those families can get on with their lives and so on. There's an easy fix. Pick up the phone. Somebody, whoever the new Home Secretary is, whoever the new Minister in charge of health and safety is, pick up the phone, get onto Thames Valley Police and give them a bollocking. Simple as that. Not investigation. I'm going, fuck that. Sort it out. You've got until December. Otherwise you're fired. End of. Simple as that. I started with a rant, and I seem to be going back down that way. I do apologise. I've seen this guy reported to police for coming to site being under the influence of drink and drugs. He was arrested, charges, had a bag of weed and cocaine in his car, and was done for supply too. That's what we need. I mean, I can come over a bit woke at times. If you're turning up for work under the influence of alcohol or drugs, is there something else going on? We don't know everybody's story, and maybe there is something to do with their home life and everything else. And I understand all that. I fully understand all of that. But that doesn't matter, actually, in the grand scheme of things. In the grand scheme of things, regardless of your home circumstances, regardless of your mental faculties and your mental health, drugs and alcohol, zero tolerance. End of. Did anyone watch the debate on Trump and Biden? Trump is a nutter, but that Biden, what the F? Yeah, he did a bad job. He did do a bad job. To be perfectly honest, the whole thing left me feeling really quite sad. Sad's probably the wrong word. You've got a nation of whatever it is, 300, 400 million people in America, and those two were the best they could come up with. And I'd say exactly the same here. Rishi Sunak ended up with the job of Prime Minister by default, effectively, because Johnson was an arsehole and Truss was worse and Theresa May did Dancing Queen, and so all of that. He ended up with a job by default. We are whatever we are, 70 odd million people, and the best we could come up with was Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. And let's not forget now, regardless of your politics, 18 months, 2 years ago, we were all chatting down the pub or over a cup of tea in the morning saying, Rishi Sunak or the Tory party, they're bloody awful, but that Keir Starmer, he's unelectable. He's just won a landslide, which, for one thing, it says a lot about how far the Tory party had slid. But the fact that somebody we considered unelectable is now in the hot seat, what does that say about the state of our political system? It makes you sad because some of the great presidents they've had, now look at what they've got. Yeah, although the funny thing about that, and I apologize to any Americans that are watching, including our friend Wolf Welder, think about it. How many really, really, really good presidents have there been? In my lifetime. Jimmy Carter, yeah. Obama, yeah. Not got much else. And ours, you think about our situation here in the UK. Why is it that whenever there's a vote for the greatest Britain, the best we can come up with usually is Winston Churchill, who's been dead 60 years. Any others? First few years of Maggie Thatcher, I'd say. I was a bit too young to really be taking too much notice, but I do remember thinking, well, she seems pretty good. The first couple of years of Tony Blair, I remember thinking, yeah, he seems pretty good. Although I think he was riding initially on a crest of the Cool Britannia thing in the early days. But really, anybody else? Cameron? No. May? No. Johnson? No. Truss? No. Sunak? No. It's not been a good run, has it? Mick Norton says the trade unions could change the impact of drugs and alcohol abuse on all sites if they pulled their finger out and pursued a more proactive approach on mandatory testing. I have a thing. It's not a health. It's not a wellness thing. I have a thing, and it kind of goes against all that I've said about the Health and Safety Executive today. The Health and Safety Executive are there to police and to investigate. But before that point, we should not need them. We are supposedly a mature and professional industry. We should be, and a couple of years ago, this was even suggested that the fact that construction and demolition could have what they refer to as earned autonomy. In other words, if you pull your finger out and really get your health and safety in order, the Health and Safety Executive will take a big step backwards and largely allow us to police ourselves. Things like drug and alcohol testing, things like reducing the amount of working at height, all of those things are in the control of those that win the work and that plan the work. John Woodward, good friend of mine within the demolition industry. I've mentioned it before. Mike Keogh did it when he was on. He has this two-word answer: what if? We're going to take down this building. Yeah, but what if? What if it fell that way and it lands on a school? What if it fell that way and landed on a railway? What if? And if you keep going with what if, what if somebody is turning up drunk or under the influence of alcohol? Well, let's put testing in place then to make sure that doesn't happen. That's a what if gone away. We shouldn't be relying on the Health and Safety Executive to set our rules or to enforce our rules. If they've said that drugs and alcohol sensibly has no place on construction sites, it should be down to the industry. The industry should say, that's it. Zero tolerance, mandatory testing, weekly, daily, every other day, whatever it might be. We will do the testing, and if you fall short, you're off. And not only are you off, we will not give you a reference, and we will inform the authorities, whoever's dished out your CSCS, CPCS card or whatever it might be, and inform them you have a track record of being under the influence of drugs and alcohol. It's not hard. Take the money out of politics and you're a house full of successful people, independent people that are used to making the right decisions and negotiating. Therein lies the issue. When you think about the first time that Donald Trump actually stood, he stood on the basis, I'm a successful businessman. Questionable, but he does like a bit of a what's the expression? A shaggy dog story. He's a liar, basically. But he was standing on the basis, I'm a businessman. I'm not influenced by tradition in politics. I am going to. He didn't. But what if? We made Minister for Chancellor of the Exchequer, Peter Jones of Dragon's Den, billionaire, built multiple businesses, knows how money works. Give him the gig. He knows the job. Why not? Why not take somebody as construction minister? Let's take somebody from industry. Somebody, the head of Lang O'Rourke or chief executive of Balfour Beatty or something like that. Put them in the job, because who knows construction better than somebody that's in construction? Chris Ford, here's food for thought. Thank you for that, Chris. I'm feeling quite peckish. We've spent the last hour or so slating the HSE. If the construction industry was the only thing that had to worry about if the construction industry was the only thing they had to worry about, answers will be forthcoming as legislation throughout the whole workplace becomes more encapsulating and varied. Have the number of staff on the HSE grown to cover this? No, they are working with less people. I fear the staff numbers and budget have fallen, and I would imagine when it comes to prosecution that if it was clear road, it would have happened sooner. Imagine the outcry when, and I'm not entirely sure where that goes. But yes, in absolute truth, they've had budgets cut, they've had staffing cut. And they were supposed to be, what was that thing? Fee for intervention. So they were basically they were pushed towards becoming self-financing. And unfortunately, I in the same way that when you put up landfill tax, you increase the incidence of fly tipping. I think when they introduced the fee for intervention, what they actually did was encourage health and safety executives, health and safety executive inspectors to concentrate almost entirely, almost exclusively on low-hanging fruit. Do we want to spend years investigating Didcot, or do we want to pop down the road where there's a demolition site and Mrs. Miggins next door has taken a photograph of somebody working without a harness? We'll go for the bloke without the harness. It's a little company. They won't have the funds to fight a prosecution. We can land ourselves a couple of grand on that, get a big pat on the back from our boss. We've encouraged that. We've allowed that to happen. That fee for intervention basically took the health and safety executives' eye off the ball, at least in my opinion. The American presidential is a joke. 70 to 80-year-olds fight to be president. That's diabolical. They're on death's door. Get a 45 to 60-year-olds to go for the presidential candidates, says Dan Cullen. Think about this. And this is a conversation we've had. Both my parents and my wife's parents both voted for Brexit. All four of them voted for Brexit. My parents are no longer here. So they voted, they basically threw a grenade and then stepped off this molten coil. You've got people of that age making decisions that will impact for generations to come. That's one thing. The other thing as well is just how in touch, regardless, maybe Joe Biden had an off night and maybe he does still have all his mental faculties. Maybe he does, I can't, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or anything else, but let's just say he is. But how in touch with the modern world of TikTok, I don't know why I'm choosing that, but how in touch with the modern world of electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, TikTok, Instagram, streaming services and the internet and all, how in touch is an 80-year-old with all of that? Just saying. There was a if I had known we were going to go down this path, I would have dug it up. There was a very old episode of the TV comedy series, Not the 9 O'Clock News, where somebody is accused of having stolen a bunch of goods. And Rowan Atkinson is dressed up as a very old fuddy-duddy judge. And one of the items that has been stolen is a digital watch. And what on earth is a digital watch? And they have to explain what a digital watch is. And then another item he stole is a video recorder. What on earth is a video recorder? And they have to explain that. Is that Joe Biden? Is that Donald Trump? Do we have to explain what the internet looks like? Mick says, Chris Ford just made a comment, and sorry, I do not agree. There is something wrong with the HSE and police inquiries. There's no excuse for the length of time this has taken. No, there isn't. No, there isn't. I have a feeling. I have a feeling that when Didcot is finally resolved, in whatever shape that is, when it is finally resolved, I reckon that those like us of the industry will sit there and look at it and go, 8 years for that? Really? Unless they are going to present a prosecution and some sort of guide to the future of demolition, there is no way on God's earth that the Health and Safety Executive nor the Thames Valley Police will be able to justify the length of time this has taken. Unless there is a system in place whereby they pick it up, they all agree to discuss Didcot once a year, just before the anniversary, so they can send out their usual, we are still investigating and we're looking at possible manslaughter charges. Unless they're just picking it up once a year, there is no way on earth this has taken 8 years, 8+ years. Running a country, says Jim Turner, it's just like running a business. The books have to balance, keep borrowing, and eventually it'll catch up to you. Too many hangers-on and malingerers, and they'll sink the ship. That's why the welfare state of free money doesn't work. Help people, but for fuck's sake, don't give out free money. I mean, I'd like some free money. If anybody's got some free money, you know where to find me. I'm here every day. But it's a good point. And Steve says, good point, Mark. Let's face it. Do we need to talk about the USA presidential race? We have enough going on with problems with this lot have taken over. I'm still keen to give them a honeymoon period of a few months just to see how it all plans out. The one thing I would say is I did see the announcement. I did mention it on the show actually yesterday. The fact that Rachel Reeves has come out and said, we're back in construction and everything else, which sounded fantastic. When you read the headlines and read the first couple of paragraphs, it was like, well, that's welcome, and we're committed to our pledge on house building and everything else. And then when you actually read the rest of it, it was like, it was one of those statements that said, we are back in construction and we've pledged to build more houses and we're going to pledge to build more houses. Somebody needs to pay for it. Somebody needs to sort out the planning system so that we don't have huge swathes of land tied up in planning permissions and stuff like that. There was none of that. As I say, I'm willing to give them a honeymoon period, but the clock's ticking. They need to do something pretty damn urgently because, let's face it, the country is in a pretty shitty state, isn't it? It is pretty shitty here at the moment. I mentioned to you a friend of mine who was asked to be an expert witness. Excuse me. An expert witness in the Didcot fiasco. He declined, but he said to me a month or two before he passed away, he could have made a fortune out of it. Makes you wonder who is. I don't know who that is, but on the basis that he's passed away, it's neither of the guys that I know. I know of two other people that declined to be involved in the Didcot investigation. Not that they were allied to it. They were approached to be expert witnesses, and both of them stepped away. One of which was Terry Cornby, and Dr. Terry Cornby, and he's actually said on this show or one of these shows, he stepped away because he did not believe that the Health and Safety Executive was equipped to carry out an investigation of that magnitude. 8.5 years later, I think he was right. I think the evidence kind of speaks for itself. Chris Ford, what does Chris Ford say? Why should all the effort be put into prosecution rather than what happened and why? Surely it makes more sense to prevent it ever happening again. don't get me wrong, if someone has been totally negligent, hang them out to dry, but it's no good shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. There are two things that need to come out of Didcot, out of Redcar, and all of the others as well. First of all is some kind of explanation for the bereaved families. Sadly, even if it's horrendous, and frankly, Redcar was, here is what happened. Here is the cause. Quite possibly, here is who we are holding responsible. Here is a degree of closure. And with that closure, I would like to think that there's some form of financial compensation. Not that that makes any bleeding difference, but here's some form of compensation. That's the first thing that needs to, first and foremost, let's make sure that the families of the bereaved know what happened to their loved ones and why they never made it home. The second thing is, as Gary Muirhead and multiple other people have said, is the learning opportunity. Didcot was an absolute disgrace and a disaster and a tragedy. Redcar, disgrace, tragedy, disaster. But the absolute truth here is we need to know as an industry, there might be something in the findings for Redcar, there might be something in the findings for Didcot that we can look at that and say, this is what caused those things. We must never do that again, and therefore we are putting in new rules, new regulation, new guidance to ensure that that is never repeated. Those learning opportunities have been withheld from us as an industry and continue to be so. Don't get me started, says Jim Turner, on the pitfalls of the current planning situation. Again, geared to suit the big boys, and that's why land is sat in reserve instead of being built on. Sat in reserve? You're not suggesting that house builders actually sit on plots of land that they own, land banks that they own, and wait for the price to go up. You're not suggesting that happens, are you, Jim? Because that surely could never happen in the UK construction industry. Wolfie says, bro, I just want lower gas prices. It hurts my wallet. Yeah. Doesn't it? Doesn't it? For everyone, being an expert witness is extremely daunting responsibility, especially when fatalities are involved, says Mick Norton. It is daunting, but imagine, I'll use Terry Cornby. He was very open about the fact that he declined the invite to be an expert witness at Didcot. Imagine if you were an expert witness and you are involved in that process, and all around you are people that aren't as committed as you are, which in Terry's case is highly likely, but not only that you can see them clearly going off in the wrong direction, and you basically have to sit there and offer your expertise, but let them run their course because they have their jobs to do. Wolfie also wants affordable housing. Jim Turner says they don't even need to own them. They just have it on retention. Surely not. Surely that's not the case. In this day and age, with a house building reputation, surely not. That's exactly what happens. Okay, people. Did we fix things? No. Did we have a good chat? I think we did. That's an hour and 42 minutes beating our head against the health and safety executive wall, as we seem to do on a fairly regular basis. But I'm going to call it a day. I promise to bring you the Caterpillar electric film tomorrow. Couldn't do it today because, frankly, got too busy talking, but I will do it tomorrow. And we've got other stuff to show you. Got a brand new product from Red Rhino to show you tomorrow as well. So stick around for that. And don't forget, tomorrow we're here not once, but twice. Here first thing, 10 o'clock. First thing for me, it's 10 o'clock is first thing. And then 7 p.m. tomorrow evening, we are going to be joined by Anne and Bill of Volvo Construction Equipment. We're going to be talking about all their latest equipment as well. So looking forward to that. Mick is off to the pub. That's how long I've been talking. Mick is now off to the pub. And Chris Ford says, roll on tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Thanks for all your contributions, peeps. As an expert witness, you have to endure the prospect of learned counsel undermining your claims of expertise. Yes, I'd crack under that level of scrutiny. I struggle to prove to people I know what I'm talking about most of the time. Even worse with that. And Chris Ford says, Volvo and football. What you need, Chris, and I may actually think about doing this myself, you need a dual screen setup. You need one with the football, you need one with the Volvo, and you can just pop back and forth. I'm expecting the Volvo thing to be much more entertaining than the football, though. I'm just saying that because it's my show, but that'll do us. There's an hour and 3/4. Go and do your thing, people. Right, any dog owners here, get a dancing pig for it. The hound is going, a dancing pig? You have a dancing pig? What? What, pray? I'm assuming this is not a real pig that you have taught to dance, although that would be fab. What is a dancing pig? I think we need to know more. Maybe tell us tomorrow. Until then, everybody, go and have a fantastic day. Thanks for all your input. Thanks for all your suggestions on how to fix the industry. Sadly, apart from mine, it's probably fallen on deaf ears, but hey, we tried. I'll see you tomorrow. All the best.